pentagram dedicated to Henry Foreman. In the years of the primal force and the dawn of terrestrial birth, man mastered the mammoth and horse, and man was the lord of the earth. He made him an hollow skin from the heart.
Hello jet lag, my old friend. How are you doing? Oh, jet lag is kicking my ass, something severely this week. My friends, just been in America. Beforehand, this podcast will be just a look back, a tired and brain-fogged look back at a week and a half spent in America. The first time I'd been in America in 7 years, so post-lockdown, post all these kind of things, post-Trump, post-Biden, post-whatever else. So it's going to be a bit about our playing, the gigs, that kind of stuff, but also just an impression of where society is at. We were in quite a lot of places over a short space of time. We were in Baltimore, we were in Chicago, in Seattle, in Phoenix, in Los Angeles, and then home in an airport almost every day for quite a few days, within time zones, even within the US, and then LA to Dublin is a huge big haul. So as you can imagine, the brain is working less powerfully than it would be normally, working on whatever's left after all these years of piracy and buffoonery and all sorts of other nonsense. Fine purveyor of shite talking for the last however many few decades, erstwhile singer in a moderately successful mid-table heavy metal band from the sunny. That was sarcasm, and this is Agitators Anonymous, episode 200 and something. I really don't know. I can't count past both my hands anymore, but that's probably all you need, isn't it? The podcast, as ever, is sponsored by Metal Blade Records. 40 years of independent history, which counts for a lot in an age where most people sell their souls to the corporate machine and all that kind of thing. You can buy the new Primordial album, and thankfully we brought many vinyls on tour and sold all of them. Many thanks to you who came out and picked up a copy of the new Irish Bastard Green vinyl at the gigs in America. 40 years of history. Use the promo code AA2024 to the links below and you can get 10% off your order. There's also sponsorship from two bands. You'll hear parts of their songs and me talking nonsense over the top of it during the course of this podcast. And you heard a song last week and you'll hear another song next week. And I'm doing this podcast while getting ready to head to the airport with Dread Sovereign to play this weekend. No rest for the wicked, no rest for the stupid. So first of all, I'd like to thank everyone who came out to all the shows. I mean, in Los Angeles last Saturday, we had over 1,000 people. We were touring with Severe Torture. Some old friends from the Netherlands, Archgoat, the wonderfully stoic and brutal Archgoat, and of course Bloodbath, which has Nick Holmes from Paradise Lost singing, who we just did a tour with in November with Primordial. So we were kind of the odd ones out, being melodic in amongst a lot of brutal bands, but it worked quite well. Of course, there were some people there who were only interested in brutal stuff, who didn't really, know what to expect, or kind of went, really not my thing. But for the most part, brilliant responses from everybody. Lowest crowd 400 or 500, as I said, up to over 1,000 in Los Angeles. Lots of merch sold, lots of enthusiasm everywhere we went, lots of politeness and enthusiasm, and that's going to be sort of a mark of what we're going to talk about today. As after a 7-year absence, as I said, it's the first time I've been to America since post-lockdown, post-Trump, post-Biden, all those kind of things. And what I found, seeing as I've just mentioned those names, we can talk about a little bit of that. And I'm sure people who've just, who were just there to talk about music or listen to music, which I found most people wanted to do. I found, and this may be unusual to many people, is that I found a real reluctance on behalf of anybody who really wanted to talk about politics. Of course, from Europe, and let's say from everywhere. Your algorithm, of course, you have to try and separate what your algorithm is preaching or throwing at you or poking you with, because we have to acknowledge the fact that we see things very often about other countries through a small prism, and that lens is defined by the algorithm, which has its best interests in keeping you outraged. It's the attention economy, what grabs us by the throat, so that it shows us always the most extreme points of view, the most grim and dark things. And believe me, we took a little detour in LA and went down Skid Row, and my God, it was absolutely shocking and appalling. And I think if you are not appalled by what you see when you drive down there, you're losing your humanity. But that was pretty much the only thing like that we saw. But if you're watching certain YouTube videos and you're, in your reels and your comments and all that kind of thing, you will get an impression. As many people did, as friends of mine did when I said I was going back to America, they were like, oh, there was a sort of element of, kind of an implication from them, like, oh, that shithole country. Just mocking, just slagging, just taking the piss out of me and all that kind of thing. But of course, there is an element which is like this. We have this, of course, throughout our lives, this American cultural hegemony that we all have lived with since childhood. And the algorithm, like I said, within which we live through the prism through social media, would just keep showing us Skid Row. It doesn't show us all the other positive, good things that you encounter day to day when you go to a country like America. Of course, America is so huge, so vast. I mean, you take a plane from Arizona to Seattle like we did, and you're going from like Seattle, Seattle sort of has a dark, brooding menace, a little bit. It was raining when we got there, it was grey. It reminded us of Dublin. We'd brought the Dublin weather with us. It has a sort of element of an industrial city in the north of Europe. Reminds me of maybe a North German town on the Baltic or something like this. A little bit. Then you go across the desert to Arizona. You get out and it's like an oven, 40 degrees of dry heat. But they are essentially two different countries. This is how it feels. And so to pigeonhole your experiences or your opinions of America or the US of A, or whatever that means, just through the prism of watching some YouTube videos, which are always, concentrated on the worst street in Philadelphia, the fentanyl this, the fentanyl that. I mean, I heard that word more than I heard the word Trump, to be honest. And I think that tells you something. Trump was convicted of his 34 counts while we were there, and I found... other than just a few people talking about it on TVs on in the background in airports, which seems to be the main place where you see MSNBC and CBS and all these kind of things, no one had any appetite to really discuss it. And people rolled their eyes at me when we wanted to discuss it. I just got a total sense of weariness over all of the politics. No one really wanted to engage. They just kind of shrugged their shoulders and rolled their eyes and just said, yeah, well, it's like that South Park episode, you're voting between a shit sandwich and a douche or whatever a douche is. I don't know, it's not a common European word, I suppose, even though it's French. And they just kind of weariness of wanting to discuss it. And when you, of course, if you're a European, you've got some ideas about, you want to poke the bear a bit, you want to try and get into a discussion just to get a feel of what people are thinking. But the general feel I got from people while over there was just a weariness, a tiredness. And when you said to them, well, how come nobody wanted to investigate, Clinton on the Epstein client logs, or how is this any different from Clinton and Monica Lewinsky? Did JFK pay off all of his mistresses? Surely isn't inflating, the prices on your real estate, isn't that kind of the very nature of real estate? All these things that we sort of didn't understand. Most of what I got back was just a sort of eye-rolling kind of tiredness with like, yeah, look, maybe he's guilty, maybe he isn't. They're all guilty of something, which sort of was my impression going into the whole thing, which was to see if people were that partisan. But what I realized was that after being in all these different cities, talking to lots of different people, was that the partisanship which we are led to believe is just this essential part of modern American society, I really didn't come across in my week and a half, 2 weeks in America. I found people were tired, people were bored of talking about it. If you pointed out that, the cost of living crisis is worse under Biden than Trump, they went, yeah, I guess so. Well, there's these other reasons, and then a kind of shrug and an eye roll and kind of, can we get back to talking about music, please? Yeah, that's what I felt. I didn't come across any sloganeering. I didn't see any MAGA hats. I didn't see any, hammer and sickles. I didn't see any Biden this, that, the other. I didn't see any, flags and banners and this, that, and the other. Nothing of the sort. In fact, all I really got from everybody was just a very tired sense of apathy with the political system. Mixed with, for on our behalf, a sort of very quick understanding that, well, things ain't as bad as they seem, I suppose. Downtown Baltimore, which 7 years ago the festival was on an underpass, the route down to the festival been pretty dark indeed, pretty grim. This time a slight little move of the festival to be in the bay around Baltimore, better place to play, clean, tidy, families going about their business, people doing their stuff. In fact, that was kind of the impression we got everywhere, was just stuff is working, stuff is happening, friendly people, polite people, you are appreciated, much appreciated. Two phrases I've never heard so much in a week and a half. Generally cool people who are willing to sit beside you in a bar out of nowhere and just talk to you, regardless of how you look. Chatting with, old guys in Chicago, old blues guys, discussing Buddy Guy. Nobody seemed to care what race anybody was or whatever. Now, of course, I know. As a European, you're going over there and people go, oh, well, it's here, it's there, it's in all these places. And I guess what I'm trying to get at is that through a certain, as I say, algorithmic prism, you're given a certain angle and you're led to believe that everywhere, every other street corner you're going to run into, I suppose, if you're naive enough to not separate yourself from the inclination to outrage of the algorithm, you're going to believe, oh, there's going to be a Chaz type Antifa state here, and then there's going to be MAGA people there, and then you get there and you realize, no, it's just wide streets, it's relatively clean. Chicago is still as great and historic as ever. Sure, Seattle has its amount of crazies, and the Los Angeles Skid Row is grim, but they still are what they are. Which, of course, is about as banal a statement as you can possibly imagine. I had a massive discussion in Baltimore with an 80-year-old guy who owned a bar there, had owned it since the late 60s, early 70s, half Irish, half Greek immigrant, who had come there in the 1960s and had sort of worked his way up to own this pub, own this building, and found his concerns were somewhat the same as mine right now in Ireland, and that was the price of housing, the price of real estate, the fact that so much of the city is just rezoned and bought by foreign investment firms who just want to knock everything down and turn, things into empty, soulless, investments that local people couldn't live in. And I just said, well, ditto Dublin. That's what's happening in Dublin. And that's what he felt was one of the most important things happening in Baltimore. And it kind of thought to ourselves, well, wow, is this really the same story, However, I will say that, and America is fast becoming the new Australia in terms of just the cost of living is absolutely insane. Compared to 7 years ago, and especially compared to 10 or 15 years ago, when we as Europeans would go with our euro to America and find our spending power was, pretty strong because the dollar was weaker than the euro. But also the cost of living. I mean, just going into grocery stores and trying to buy like grapes or something, and you go, hang on, is this really $16? Our guitar player bought 2 glasses of wine and a piece of cheesecake. How decadent of him in the airport on the way home. $52 everywhere, everything was just $25 for a whiskey and coke. At the festival, $15 for a beer, $25 for this. Even when you get to the outskirts bits, or the edge of town, so to speak, price of course came down, but it really struck me as like, wow, this is the costs of everything have gone insane. I remember being really struck in Australia by how insanely expensive everything was. But then again, Australians, they earn quite a lot of money in their jobs, and I really got the impression in America, people aren't earning as much money to cope for these things. Now, this probably points then, you could probably say, well, Alan, you've just sort of said that things don't seem as bad as my algorithm tells me they are. But you've also just said the cost of living crisis is insane. So maybe you just didn't see the dark underbelly where people are struggling, working 2 and 3 jobs. And yeah, you're probably right. There's a certain level of, out of sight, out of mind about that, perhaps, because obviously people are struggling when things are so insanely expensive. And this is the same case here. This is the same case all over the world. And you've been trying to sort of discuss people why that is. And everyone, I guess everyone was fed the story that, oh, it's because of Putin, it's because of Ukraine. That's why everything is more expensive. And I just think that that's an out for all of the companies. The supply and the demand. You say there's an energy crisis. Energy companies then are making more profit than ever before. It's well recorded. We say there is, there's war here, there's war everywhere. And who is making the most money right now? Weapons manufacturers. The over 100 billion bipartisan bill, that's gone through the American Senate or whatever you want to call it, it's not being given to the Ukraine. It's being given to weapons companies to pour weapons into Ukraine. And you think to yourself when you drive around Skid Row in LA, I think they could probably fix this if they took a tiny bit of that money that they're spending on that and fix this problem. But as a snapshot in a week and a half of America, I think we all came away thinking things don't seem as bad as sometimes they're portrayed by the media, which I think you could probably say about most things, even though some things, of course, are bad, but also the acknowledgement that you don't quite get to see everything. But in general, my feeling was that people were just very tired of and wary of know-it-all Europeans coming over telling them how their political system worked and the faults of their political system and this and that and the other. But we were struck after all these years of coming, we take a couple of years off every time we've been in and out of America. We were absolutely struck by how expensive everything is. It's just kind of insane. Just day to day, it was almost impossible to not spend $100. Of course, if you're in a venue all day and there's food and there's all that kind of stuff, you're spending less money. But just the day to day of really just living, it doesn't surprise me why people just have to eat Taco Bell every night after doing their two jobs because they're just exhausted, which of course then feeds into the the obesity angle, feeds into the illness angle. The food that people can afford keeps them sick. Then you're leveling things at Big Pharma, and the whole medical situation with people not having health care. You can see how this just rolls around and around and around, because when you go into a newsagent, you will see like the over-the-counter pharmacy, the medicines that are available in just a 7-Eleven is as wide and as big as the confectionery aisle. And then you realize, like, oh, okay, people are just in this cycle of, earning little, working a lot, eating shit, getting sick. And it sort of rolls around like that, which might sound like my contradictory to my, sunny optimism after the start of the podcast. But you certainly see that this is the cycle that most people just cannot break. And it's hard to break when you're just putting this terrible food into your system all the time. So some of you will have heard the song by the band Brazen Tongue on the podcast last week. If not, go back and have a listen to it again. They're a band based out of Chicago and Gothenburg, Sweden. Diverse array of influences within metal. Brazen Tongue's music is deeply rooted in the foundations of classical metal, thrash, black metal, death metal. And their album of Crackling Embers and Sorrows Drowned is coming out, it should be out actually today as you're hearing this. So if you like what you're hearing underneath this, or go back and listen to the song from last week, go and order it. Support underground independent metal. So anyway, some of you will have noticed that Paul, the bass player, Primordial, hasn't been there recently, and I made an Instagram post about it. He's injured his shoulder, and so recovering from that. No, he's not left the band and all that kind of thing. I know it might have looked a little bit strange to see three baldy heads on the stage in America, but that's the reason why. So we have Shawnee from Unyielding Love, good Irish band, filling in for him on the bass. That is the reason why. I think that that, how can we say, iconic look of Primordial with, Mick with the black hair on one side and Kieran with the blonde hair on the other side. Things change, we never really made a statement about Mick, not playing on the last album or leaving the band, because it's not really our way to draw attention to those things. As I stated before in the podcast, Mick just decided to step aside because he was just sort of a bit over with travelling and fields of people and backstages, which I totally understand. And after a week and a half of just constant travelling and now having to do it again in a couple of hours, I do understand. The brain gets foggy and the bones get weary. Some people ask me what was the conclusion of the vague discussion I made. No, I never allude to, I call arguing online like doing your dirty linen in public, as we say. So I never respond to people who say things about, generally never respond to things people say about me or the band on forums, whether it's, this third, fourth, fifth hand, just nonsense information, just lists compiled by kids with agendas or whatever, that kind of thing. It's just, you're dignifying the nonsense by commenting, and I just generally tend to not. So you don't find things like that in the podcast. But I did allude to something that someone had said about the gig in Arizona, about wanting to police people's clothes on entry and all this kind of stuff. And I'll just say what I said from the stage after the process, let's say, got quietly shut down by the owner of the building, who realised it was not in their economic interest to begin sort of allowing the staff to arbitrarily and unilaterally declare themselves the fashion police. Politics is not a t-shirt, although maybe it entirely is a t-shirt in 2024, because context and nuance and all those kind of things are not important to people. But what I did say from the stage before the song We Shall Serve is that this was a song inspired by the story about Joseph Plunkett. I said before, doing the promo for the last album, if you know the song Grace, a very beautiful traditional Irish song, it's about this Irish nationalist poet, Joseph Plunkett, who was executed after the Civil War, the Rising. And you can go and look into his story. And I just sort of said, if you wish to silence or cancel Primordial because of some random nonsense without investigation, just some spurious list somebody has compiled, then you are silencing our song, which is a kind of moment of living history inspired by his genuine history. I'm not explaining that very well because my brain is a bit tired and a bit foggy, but what I'm trying to say is that trying to silence or censor us means that you censor elements of his life that we are trying to breathe life into living history. And I think that's a terrible thing. All right, anyway, moving on. You will have noticed quite a lot of bands sharing this article that came out about the cost of visas rising. Now, if you've been listening to the podcast, I've kind of talked a little bit of the cost of visas. A visa for a band of 5 people with conveyancing, with legalities, with all this kind of thing. Every European band needs a work visa to play in the States. You can travel on ESTA. Technically, it's if you're earning money playing in the States, but you have to prove that you're not earning any money if you come over with a guitar and they go, hey, where's your working visa? They may very well put you in a side room and send you back. And then you're banned from the country for 8 years. American bands don't have to do that landing in Europe. They don't have to pay anything. I mean, there's a small fee in the UK, but they can just land in Europe and play, while the other way, a standard visa is about €4,000. Now, there was this article doing the rounds. Lots and lots of European bands shared it, and it would have stated that the work visa applications for a P visa, it's called, which is temporary and for artists attending a specific event, would have increased from a rate of $460 to $1,615. The longer term O work visa, which provides artists with a 3-year stay, now my visa was 1 year, would have jumped from $460 to $1,655. So that was this was in 2023. So this is an increase of 250%. Plans to raise the touring visa fees. There was some backlash from musicians and that kind of thing. And some people have said to me, no, this article got everything wrong, because the article was saying that it was going up to $1,890 or something per person. And then some people were like, he messaged me and saying, can European bands stop spreading this? It's disinformation, all that kind of thing. And it's not actually that much at all. Okay. And then somebody sent me some links to visas they'd paid and said, look, it's only gone up $100 or so. And if you put into your search engine, whichever search engine you're using, increased visa fees for artists to the USA, you will find many, many articles with varying different reports. I tried to find one that was a little bit less, hyperbolic. And this one is saying that RA reports the longer-term O visa will jump from $460 to $1,055 per musician an increase of 129%, and the P visa will move from $460 to $1,015, 121% jump. The price hike is the first time artist visa costs have increased since 2016. So let's just say the increase goes from people forget also that you need a lawyer to convey these things. You need to collect things for your petition. As a European band, you can't just you need someone in the US who is basically booking the shows or you're working with to petition for. You need letters of recommendation, all this kind of stuff. So the cost isn't just $1,000 per person. It's not just a straight $5,000 for a band. It's got $2,500 to $3,000 of legal fees. Now, if you know a way around that, I've tried and looked into it and found that I couldn't manage to get everyone we worked with, whether it was MDF or any other tour promoters, were just like, look, you can't find a conveyancing team that's going to do this for a couple of $100, and you can't do it yourself from Europe. You can't just apply for these visas, as I understand it. Hit me up in the comments if that's not true, or DM me. But what it will mean is that the costs of bringing a band over will probably go up about 100, 120, 130%. And I think this is going to deeply affect European touring bands. Because if you think about it, the cost of flights has gone up. You used to be able to fly Dublin to, let's say Dublin to Boston for 350, 400 euros. Many of our flights going from Ireland to Baltimore were more like 800 euros plus, without luggage. You also, as my new friend Jess, who tour managed the small tour, she just calls it humans of late stage capitalism. And I totally understand this, in the sense that flying once upon a time used to value the customer, and you were able to change names, you were able to have a couple of allowances, and you could do things. They gave you some leeway now and again. Now, all of those moments of leeway are just completely cut. The marginal gains of not allowing you to do this. I'm flying with Lufthansa today. Lufthansa does not allow name changes anymore. You just have to buy a new ticket. Insane. Like, just not, even though your tax dollars propped us up during lockdown, we're going to change all the rules to screw you even more so. And as it proved with American Airlines or whatever, just your inability to check in luggage online. So you just have to $80 at the checkout with credit card for the first baggage, $90 for the second one. No argument, no nothing. Can't check in online. No, can't move names. Nothing like this. Just all these small corners constantly cut to make traveling more expensive, more difficult. As Jess would say, late stage capitalism is just all about every incremental marginal gain just trumps your personal customer experience, or whatever you want to say. All the things that maybe were not just, so aggressively enforced, or these new rules, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years ago, where the customer was valued as the most important part of the chain. It could be naive, you could say. They're just all gone. The Chemical Brothers, just happened to be in the article I'm looking at here, recently cited rising costs as the reason why they could not play shows in the US. The costs have gone up so much, Ed Simon said in September last year. Don't know anything really about the Chemical Brothers, but it's just not really viable at the moment. I'm apologetic to the people who want to see us, that it has been increasingly difficult for us to get to America. Because we had the time of our lives playing there. And that's kind of the way Primordial has felt. We've always loved playing in America, but the costs in the last 10 or 15 years, especially for bands, because let's be clear, bands are not professional anymore. There's Behemoths and Amon Amarth and whoever else, but most bands are not professional. They don't make a living from playing music. So they have to work other jobs. They have responsibilities and families and rents and kids and all this kind of other, the mundanities of life that are outside of the 1970s, 1980s sort of sepia-toned, almost famous vision of what a band is, where you just stroll around the world and just, taking in dollars from left, right and centre. And, it's this like sort of idyllic vision of being the travelling troubadour of a musician. This is just not true. People work in warehouses, they work in all those kind of things. Playing in a band is a kind of like an expensive, guilty obsession that eventually will catch up with you. And it's kind of like, if you do make some money from it, then it's kind of like that extra, cherry on top of your normal wage that helps cope with the cost of living or the energy crisis, or whatever you want to say it. It's a kind of semi-indulgent hobby for most people, or indulgent hobby. And so this is the reason why, if these increases, and they are going to go up, it looks like, once you add in flights and you're printing of merch, which you have to do in the States, you can't bring merch with you. Like I said, a touring band will start on day one of that tour, $12, $13, $14, $15,000 in the hole. And I'd say the planners of festivals are tearing their hair out now with if you've booked bands for next year and these rising visa costs, they're going to be knocked onto you as the customer at the festival. You're going to go like, why is this shirt $50, $60? Well, these are the reasons. These are the reasons why, because these price hikes are going to hit artists. It's at this point I will do the second ad read. Come on, brain, let's go. Apologies if this podcast has been a little bit foggy, but that is the nature of my brain right now. Anyway, from the cold shadows of Wales emerges WRACH. WRACH. Enigmatic one-man black metal force, relentless riffs, thunderous percussion, all of those kinds of things. Listeners to Agitators Anonymous can receive 10% off their order by inputting the code ALANAW at apocalypticwitchcraft.co.uk. You're going to hear the track The Throes of the Covenant underneath this, but next Tuesday you're going to hear the whole song uninterrupted with all of the links to the codes underneath. Support independent music and give it an order, give it a listen. Next Tuesday, our whole song. So where does that leave tour in the US? Well, we'll see. We have had a few more offers to play in America after being there last week, and some of them look pretty positive for us trying to get over before either the visas run out or the nukes fall. One or the other. We hope to be back before then. So what's the moral of the story? The postcard from the US, if I was to try and be concise about it, if my brain would allow me to be, I think it is that things aren't quite as bad as they might seem, that your algorithm might tell you they are, because don't forget, it's designed to outrage, it's designed to poke you with all the things that you think divide us and conquer us and all those kind of things. Those platitudes I've said before, that the things people end up fighting about are, in the grand scheme of things, mostly just culture war fluff that's designed to keep people at each other's throats. And by and large, my entire 2-week trip across America, I found people weary and tired of the conversation in real life conversations, not online conversations, and mostly super polite, really enthusiastic, positive people who thought that I would say that at the end of an episode of Agitators Anonymous. Well, my friends, this episode has been fueled by jet lag and tiredness and brain fog, and normal service where I have more than a couple of brain cells to draw upon next week should be resumed. All right, my friends, Agitators Anonymous.